Star Trek brings back Captain Picard's TNG Enterprise like Generations never happened. For nearly 3 decades, Star Trek Generations has stood as a controversial milestone in the next generation's legacy. The film infamously destroyed the beloved USS Enterprise D, leaving many fans with a bittersweet farewell to the starship that defined an era. But now, in a triumphant twist of narrative fate, modern Star Trek has brought back Captain Jean-Luc Picard's Enterprise as though Generations never happened, offering a stunning tribute to both the past and future of the franchise. This resurrection isn't just fan service, it's a rewriting of Trek's cinematic trauma. The return of the Enterprise D in Star Trek Picard Season 3 rewrites history, not by retconning the events of Generations, but by reframing them with emotional gravity, nostalgic reverence, and a deeper understanding of what the Enterprise truly meant. And the implications of this comeback stretch far beyond a single show. They ripple through the core of Star Trek's legacy, challenging what it means to grow old, reclaim identity, and honor the ships and people that made us fall in love with the final frontier. The Ghost of Generations. When Star Trek Generations premiered in 1994, it was meant to serve as a ceremonial passing of the torch from Captain Kirk to Captain Picard. But what fans remember most is not the team-up, but the destruction of the Enterprise D. In a moment of shocking vulnerability, the iconic ship crash-landed on Veridian 3, a helpless victim of the Duras sisters' bird of prey. Despite the crew's survival, the symbolic loss of the ship left a wound that TNG fans never fully recovered from. Unlike the Enterprise refits in the original series films, the death of the D felt permanent. It was replaced in First Contact by the sleeker, darker Enterprise E, a capable warship but never a beloved home. The E lacked the familial warmth and sense of grandeur that defined the D. While it served admirably across 3 films, fans continued to mourn the D's untimely end. The destruction of the Enterprise D in Generations was never just about losing a ship. It marked the beginning of a tonal shift in Star Trek toward darker, grittier, and more militaristic storytelling. The optimism and moral idealism that TNG embodied began to fade. Until Picard Season 3 came along. Picard Season 3. The redemption of a starship. When Star Trek Picard Season 3 brought back the Enterprise D in its final episodes, it felt like the universe correcting a 30-year-old mistake. Unearthed from the Starfleet Fleet Museum, lovingly restored by Commodore Geordie LaForge, and reintroduced with swelling music and teary-eyed reverence, the Enterprise D made its return not as a relic, but as a savior. The return of the D wasn't just a narrative convenience. It was a carefully orchestrated emotional crescendo that allowed Picard, Riker, Data, Troy, Worf, LaForge, and Crusher to sit once more on the bridge of their true home. Every panel, every LCAR screen, and every turbolift door was restored with reverent detail. The lighting, the carpet, the curves of the bridge, all recreated not for nostalgia alone, but to reflect the truth. The Enterprise D was more than a ship. It was them. By bringing back the Enterprise D, Picard Season 3 recontextualized Generations. It didn't pretend the crash never happened, but it reframed that loss as something reparable. Starfleet had preserved the saucer section. Geordie had spent decades secretly restoring it. In that revelation was a kind of grace, a recognition that just because something ended badly doesn't mean it has to stay that way. A ship reclaimed, a captain restored. Jean-Luc Picard's character arc throughout Picard dealt heavily with regret, legacy, and unresolved trauma. The return of the Enterprise D becomes a literal metaphor for the healing of his past. For so long, Picard was defined by what he'd lost: the Borg assimilation, Data's death, the dissolution of the Romulan evacuation. But reclaiming the Enterprise D allowed him to reclaim the version of himself that existed before all that pain. In many ways, this restoration of the D mirrors the reconstruction of Picard himself, now synthetic but still guided by his unshakable principles and moral clarity. Like the ship, Picard has been patched together, reactivated, and given one final mission with the crew that defined him. The emotional payoff of seeing him in that center chair, engaged, with all his senior staff around him, is a moment that rewrites Generations. Where that film cast Picard in the shadow of Kirk, Picard Season 3 lets him stand alone, proud, whole, and surrounded by equals. It is, finally, his Enterprise again. Why the Enterprise E never truly fit. The Enterprise E served Starfleet with distinction during the Dominion War and the battles against the Borg and Shinzon. But despite its superior tactical capabilities, it never earned the same affection from fans or characters. The E was colder, sharper, a warship for a darker era. Even in Picard Season 3, its fate is hand-waved with comedic dismissal. Worf quips about it being his fault. It's not around anymore. That intentional vagueness underscores a deeper truth. The E was never the emotional heart of the next generation. It was a plot necessity, not a character in itself. The D, by contrast, was a character. Its return emphasizes the difference between a ship that serves a story and a ship that defines a story. The Enterprise D was where Wesley grew up, where Data discovered humanity, where Riker and Troy fell in love, and where Picard hosted diplomatic negotiations and archaeological debates. It was a floating utopia, a flying embassy, a home. More than nostalgia or rewriting of tone, modern Star Trek has often been accused of leaning too hard on nostalgia. But the return of the Enterprise D transcends simple fan service. It's a tonal correction. By restoring the D, Picard reclaims the optimism and idealism of the next generation. It reminds audiences that there is still room in modern Trek for grandeur, for emotional sincerity, and for characters whose bonds matter as much as their battles. In a franchise increasingly dominated by kinetic action, time travel chaos, and existential dread, the return of the D was a quiet act of rebellion. It said, the heart of Star Trek isn't just phasers and warp cores, it's the people and the places they call home. Legacy ships, legacy heroes. The implications of the Enterprise D's return stretch beyond Picard. In an era of legacy sequels and generational handoffs, Star Trek is facing the same challenges as franchises like Star Wars and Doctor Who: how to honor the past while building the future. The D's restoration sets a template for how to do both. It acknowledges what was lost, but also celebrates what endures. In the final episodes of Picard, we don't just see a ship, we see a monument to continuity, to faith in exploration, to found family. And it's not just sentimentality. It serves the plot. The outdated D becomes the only ship immune to the Borg's assimilation of the fleet. In other words, the past literally saves the future. It's a message that resonates deeply within Star Trek's ethos. Progress means nothing if we forget where we came from. Like generations never happened, but better. In the end, Picard Season 3 doesn't erase generations. It redeems it. It takes the painful legacy of that film, the destruction of the Enterprise D, and rewrites it as a wound that can be healed. By doing so, it allows the next generation to end on its terms. The original crew is given a send-off more befitting their status. They aren't split apart.